Welcome back to The Doctor Is In. We are entering our 4th year of podcasting and looking back at our start. We started the podcast during the peak of the 2020 COVID quarantines in an effort to continue to speak with our colleagues when we could no longer meet in person. Over the next few weeks, as we return to our beginnings, we encourage you to listen to our guests' most recent interviews after you hear their first and see their growth and adaptation through these unprecedented times. This week, we're going back to our interview with Allison Justice, originally recorded in April of 2020. Truly, thank you for growing with us.
Welcome to The Doctor Is In Quarantine. In this podcast series, I'm talking to friends and colleagues in the cannabis and horticulture industries to see how they're doing during the COVID-19 crisis. You'll hear conversations about the impacts we've seen so far on the supply and demand of agricultural products and resources, how travel schedules for work and conferences have been upended, and how we're all coping with toilet paper shortages, or not. My guests also give their predictions for the medium and long-term impacts this pandemic may have on our industries and society at large. The general consensus is that it depends a lot on how long the quarantine will last. With that, I invite you to sit back and join the conversation. If you want to share any of your experiences or observations through this crisis, you can find us on Instagram or LinkedIn. Enjoy. In this episode, I talked to Dr. Allison Justice, owner and operator of The Hemp Mine, a 40-acre hemp farm in South Carolina. Many of my listeners probably know her as the former VP of cultivation for Outco, a vertically integrated cannabis producer in San Diego. She is well known throughout the cannabis industry for her research-based approach to optimizing cultivation practices and her willingness to share the results and help other cultivators dealing with similar challenges. I know that I have learned a lot from Allison's posts on Instagram, teaching us all about the Farm Bill, about the in-house research that she's done on everything from drying to different LED lights, and she has been an invaluable resource to our industry. So sit back and enjoy this conversation with Dr. Allison Justice.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi!
Hello.
Can you hear me?
How are you?
I am doing great. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Busy as ever. Even with quarantine, we are staying busy. Everyone's working remotely. I'm still going into the office by myself. Marcia joins me. Shaniqua joins me. And we're keeping our little vertical farm going. So we have a bunch of lettuce and arugula and some basil plants. So we're ready to harvest this week. We're going to have some fresh produce.
All right. Self-sustainable indoors.
Exactly. Locally grown, micro-locally grown.
Awesome.
The question is going to be, who do we give it all to now?
We're having a lot of salad.
It's a lot of salad. And not enough things that, you would put in a pot for soup either. It's a lot of lettuce. How are you? What's going on in South Carolina?
Oh, man. The South is a funny place. Let me just tell you.
I imagine. Yes.
Yeah. No, it's fine. I moved to home, which is the middle of nowhere, and we've got close to 100 acres, and I live on the farm, so I don't the closest town is about 30 minutes, so before all this happened, it's not like I was spending a ton of time out. So personally, of course it changed a lot, but at the same time, I'm stuck in the middle of the country, so maybe not quite as much as, yeah. I mean, if I was still living in California in the middle of San Diego in a little apartment, life would be much different than it is here on the farm. But no, it's going okay. We're hunkering down, and like you said, staying really busy. I didn't know how this was going to affect us, so it's not been too bad yet. So fingers crossed and knocking on wood for that to stay the same.
Is South Carolina under quarantine? Is every state under quarantine at this point?
South Carolina is not.
Okay.
It's not. Like a lot of things, it's slow to follow behind. But I mean, bars and parks and stuff like that are closed, but it's not controlled. They're not giving out tickets if you're out at nighttime. So
Yeah. That's kind of how it starts. That's how it started here in California, in Sacramento. And then, I mean, very quickly it turned into quarantine. And yeah, my sister, she lives in Santa Clara County, which is at least was one of the initial hot spots near San Jose. And she was put in self isolation 2 weeks ago already.
oh no.
And her school is closed until May 1st.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's interesting. She was saying this weekend that one of the things that she's noticed is how tired her eyes are because she's doing all of her work on this little tiny computer screen now. And
All
she
right.
doesn't have like any face-to-face time with her students or other teachers or people. And so her eyes are really straining with all the computer work. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah, it's funny. I'm actually on the computer less, actually out in the field in the greenhouses a bit more. It's been nice, but at the same time, kind of, you'd think most people are locked in their house, so their inbox would be empty, and I'm kind of behind just because I've been outside so much.
Yeah, you said that. You said that. Oh, I'm not really on email or checking my email very often right now.
Seems a little backwards.
So how is the farm doing?
It's doing good. We've actually made a little pivot. This coming year, we were planning on planting about 60 acres of hemp and for field production. Part of that, well, a lot of that, almost all of it we'll use in our consumer goods, so the tinctures and all that sort of stuff. But then, a big chunk of that is our trial garden. So looking at the different genetics, a lot of my crosses from the year before, and, having people out to see how they're doing in the field for sales the following year. But we've actually decided that we're going to take about a third of that land and plant in vegetables, which we haven't done vegetables commercially in quite a while. But, just due to a few things, with one being the coronavirus, that's kind of one of the biggest things it was a struggle to make your mind up to do that, but we did it. And so we're going to be growing a whole lot of okra and tomatoes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It almost sounds like this was timely because, if anything, this is the right season to make those decisions about field and nursery crops, right?
Exactly.
So will you be, I'm assuming then as a farm, you're going to actually sell that produce that you're going to be growing.
Oh, yeah. Yep. We'll have part of our crew will be going to farmers markets and probably little roadside stands and everything of that nature. Kind of cool, kind of a turn of things. I've been living in a very different world, being in San Diego and then just kind of coming back and being on a farm, but it's still being cannabis, but now to vegetables. And I don't know, it's kind of cool. Especially with the virus, everybody is pushing buying local and, supporting everybody around you.
Yeah.
And, with some of these, who knows where this is going to go? Hopefully it clears up in 2 weeks, but you don't know that. It could last for months and months. And, we don't really know how that's going to affect the supply chain of food. A lot of our food comes not only from out of state, but from out of the U.S. And so who knows what'll happen? Locally produced might be more important than ever.
I've been kind of curious about that myself. I've been talking to some of our clients who are, vertical farmers, and a lot of them are saying that they have orders sold for the next month. to grocery chains. Like they are just going to be bumping. And a lot of them were startups. Like a lot of them were just pilot projects.
Right.
Just trying to figure some things out before they built their full scale system. And all of a sudden they're called to action. Like they need to grow some real produce, which is so interesting. And then I've talked to some other farmers who were really focused on like restaurants and small retail, and they're hurting. Like they might be closing their doors for a little while because they don't have anyone to sell to because they were growing at such a small scale. It's just, yeah, it's so interesting to me. And then to think about even the concept of quarantining states and closing borders to interstate commerce, it's just like, wow, this is going to be hyper local agriculture. And there's been this big push or pitch for, indoor farming is going to help with locally grown and communities and jobs and things. And then you have the naysayers who are like, oh yeah, but the carbon footprint of transporting lettuce 3,000 miles could never make up for the carbon footprint of a vertical farm. Well, I'm pretty sure none of those models included a coronavirus.
Exactly. Wow, I didn't even think about it that way.
It's so interesting. I'm just so curious to see how this pans out. And it's interesting that you guys are growing the two crops you're growing. I have to ask, so okra. Personally, actually, I love okra. My dad made okra when I was a kid. I think I'm one of the only people in California I know of that actually knows what okra is and actually likes it. So I'm already placing my order for some pickled okra.
Oh my gosh,
yes. Put in my Bloody Marys in the future.
Oh, you got it. Yeah, pickled okra is probably my favorite.
Yes.
Followed by fried okra, of course.
Yes, of course.
But no, it's a huge thing in the South. I mean, everybody has okra at least once or twice a week, and would more if they could. It's funny, when I was in San Diego, I lived. I mean, I wasn't in downtown, but I was pretty close, and but I had me a tiny little yard. And I had vegetables all in it, and I made a border with okra to my neighbor. And when everybody was walking, everybody walks their dogs, and they're walking by my house, and people just didn't know what it was. It was the funniest things. They thought it was that hibiscus, which I understand the flower kind of looks similar.
Yeah.
Is that marijuana? There were so many guesses. Just, yeah, you're right. California doesn't know okra.
No, we don't need to, I guess.
You should, though. You should. I'm going to send you some.
Why isn't okra a thing here? And why is it in the South? It must grow really well in the South.
It does. It grows. Yeah.
It likes hot and humid.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next cannabis grower in Florida or Puerto Rico or Hawaii, I can just say, you know what? You should really grow
okra.
So, I mean, how have you been keeping in touch with people in San Diego and California? How's everyone doing out there?
Yeah, I've been keeping in touch. Everybody seems mad that the beaches are closed.
Oh, yeah.
Which I totally get. No, actually, I talked to one of my buddies earlier on I was on a drive, and he's doing well. I mean, yeah, I think everybody's pretty much in the same boat. Just the big question mark is what I guess is driving a lot of people crazy. Just how long is this going to last? How much is it really going to affect us more than it already has? Yeah, who knows? And I don't know. I mean, what about you guys? I know you're staying busy, but have you heard if any of the states who maybe was granting licenses have stopped or kind of put that on pause?
No, not necessarily. I mean, I just had a conversation like a week ago with a potential client who was asking questions about how best to submit their application for a license. And this was in Illinois, to talk and what some of the HVAC related considerations should be, because he wanted to, sound intelligent and put up, his best foot forward. And, that was just a week ago. And then maybe a day later, I got an email from somebody else asking a similar question, wanting to talk to me about an application process. And I'm like, okay, well, they don't think that this is slowing down necessarily. And I mean, our clients, I mentioned a little bit about the vertical farming clients and that they're generally doing pretty good. I mean, I've had a couple of clients, even outside of the US, in Europe, who are saying that that this crisis is actually motivating their investors to move even more quickly on their vertical farm projects,
Oh,
because they see a huge opportunity with this whole idea of locally grown, and being, self-sustainable and resilient and all that kind of good stuff. With cannabis, yeah, I mean, I'm not seeing a slowdown at all. We're still fielding questions. We're still getting new projects, greenhouses and indoors all over the country. Our current projects are still moving along. I mean, I've touched base with everyone to say, okay, do you think that this project is still going to move forward at its current pace? Do you think you're still going to be able to pay your bills? Like all those questions, because I really need to understand cash flow. I need to understand if I can keep my engineers employed through this. What are my options as a small business owner? Which are some pretty good options, I'll admit, but do we need it? And so far, the answer is no. So we're really lucky that we can be busy and also keep everyone employed full time. And, we're also really lucky that the work that we do, we can do from anywhere.
right.
So we don't have to go on site. And I'll be perfectly honest, I am so grateful to not have the insane travel schedule that I was supposed to have.
Yeah, I get that. I get that.
The last trip I took was to San Diego, and I sent you that video of me on the beach, and that's probably the last time I'm going to be on a beach for a long time.
Yeah.
And the last time that I am at a conference for a little while, and it's just my February was so insane, and even just thinking about, could I have contracted COVID-19 with all the travels that I did, even just in February. I mean, the beginning of February, I was in Orlando for a conference, and then the end of February, I was in San Diego, and the middle of February, I was in 2 different places in California. So, I mean, I could have picked it up from anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's even just thinking about, should I be self-quarantining even before we were required to? The answer seemed like a pretty simple yes.
Yeah.
Because I was exposed to so many people.
Did you have any symptoms, or you're just thinking, you could have been put in that situation where maybe you're asymptomatic?
I was asymptomatic, exactly, that I just don't want to risk it. I mean, I have a mom who is in her 70s, and she is self-quarantined with my stepdad and wiping down their doorknobs and light switches every single day, even though they don't let anyone eat, probably within 500 yards of their house. I'm just like, Mom, really?
Mm-hmm.
And then my mother-in-law has stage 4 breast cancer. So it's just, and we're her primary caregiver. So it's just like, I'm just going to stay away from all these people for as long as possible. Luckily, we already had a ton of masks because of my mother-in-law. So, because when she would go to the hospital, or we'd go to the hospital, we were always trying to really take a lot of precautions. So we were already stocked up on a lot of the things that people have been scrambling for or aren't able to get. So in some ways, we're, I guess, lucky. If that's
Yeah, well, same here, because of, for spraying pesticides and cleaning agents and all that sort of stuff. So we had, plenty of gloves and N95 masks. Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Not quite the same boat. My mom's not sick, but she's in her 60s, and she will not let me in the house if I go into a store without gloves and a mask on. Mm-hmm. So I've definitely been that person in the store, because that's the last thing I ever want is to get her or anybody else sick.
Exactly. Marcia went to the store last week, and she said that, so she wore a mask and she wore gloves, and she came home and she immediately took a shower, washed her hair for the first time probably in 10 days, like normal. And, but she said she was just appalled by all the elderly people who were taking no precautions whatsoever. They weren't wearing gloves, they weren't wearing masks, they didn't have like somebody with them to help them. Like they were just, shopping like normal, which is so weird. I don't know.
No,
I think that they would be the ones that were most cautious, but
yeah, I went to Tractor Supply, and I had my gear on, and there were just people out like nothing was wrong, and they look at me like, I have something ridiculous on, and they're mumbling under their mouth as I walk by, and one guy even said something about, you don't need to wear that. It's only that way if you've got something. And I'm thinking, well, what if I am asymptomatic and have something on? Maybe we all should be wearing masks.
Right.
And then he mumbled something about, what's China going to send us next? I'm telling you.
Oh my God.
Tractor Supply in South Carolina. I mean, if you want some entertainment. Goodness.
I've been looking for an excuse to come to South Carolina. That might be the thing that finally got there. I'm sure there was at least one person there mumbling under their breath too, like, oh, she used to live in California.
I'm sure. I probably had one of my cannabis t-shirts on or something.
Even better.
That always gets the good looks.
Do people know that you guys are growing hemp?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you live in a small community.
No. Oh man, so this is going on year 3. Year 1, people again would look at us like we were crazy, and if we smell like it, which is common, especially during harvest season. I mean, you can't help it, and then you get nose blind, and so you go around smelling like weed all the time.
Right.
And so we'd get a lot of dirty looks, and there was so much theft, people stealing it, and what the cops were saying is that they were selling it as weed. And so, I mean, hundreds of our plants took out of the field. I mean, it was ridiculous. Wow. And then year 2, it kind of cut it out. I mean, we put a few people in jail because did you know that if you mess with someone's agricultural crop, it's a felony. And so then I think of all those times I've picked cotton on the side of the road or oranges.
Are you serious?
Yeah. So they got some serious charges. And so I guess people realized that, we're not playing around. But, that was crazy. And then, a lot of people, we'd hear through the grapevine, people think we're doing this, doing that. And again, it's just hemp. But this year, it's like everybody just had a complete turnaround. And we actually sponsored my niece's rec team. And so the hemp mine was on their volleyball uniform. God. Right? Like, how cute is that? And like, everybody was good with it. Yeah.
That is awesome.
Cool. And the kids, it's really just the parents that have this stigma, and the kids were just like, oh, this is so cool. We can be the hempettes. Oh, it was so cute.
That didn't take very long for people to turn around. It was because everybody tried buying that quote unquote weed and realized that there was nothing to it. And they're like, all right, I guess it really is just hemp. For everything they said about hemp is true, damn it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so I wanted to ask some of the questions that I had for you. So you live in South Carolina, so you already mentioned that self-isolation is not necessarily challenging. Have you so far found anything challenging, even as just a farmer? I mean, have you been able to find the seed and the fertilizer and everything that you need to be farming?
Yeah, thus far, we've not been held back by anything because of the virus. I mean, honestly, all of the local ag stores are staying open. They're doing things differently now. It's curbside pickup, but they've not been out of anything. The only thing we had a little trouble with was getting lime, and that was simply because there's too much rain in the mine.
Normal, natural stuff.
Yeah, normal delays. And so, no, to be honest, again, knock on wood, nothing too terrible yet.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and we're not getting any reports of, we've known the local ag store, for generations now, and so, they've said there's no shortages, at least thus far, nothing to be expected immediately. So, as far as that goes, we're pretty good.
Do you think that, so I know you said you weren't really sure how this was all going to pan out, but I mean, you've switched to some food crops because you recognize that there's probably going to be a demand for that regionally, and kind of goes back to your roots. With hemp, do you have any sense of whether or not the demand is still going to be there? I mean, I feel like maybe the demand was already in short supply in some ways because people are trying to figure out or trying to build the technology and the infrastructure around hemp. Do you think that this is going to slow that down or speed it up or have no effect? Any ideas?
Well, we're vertically integrated, so we've got, all sorts of arms that can be affected differently. Okay. Right now, today, the biggest thing that has been affected and is obvious is that our wholesale retail stores have slowed down. And obviously that's because a lot of them have closed. And so that's drastically dropped just the past few weeks. Next, we got the online store, and that one has probably quadrupled within the past few weeks, which is, great for us. That's a easy shipment. So as long as the postal service keeps working, we'll be in good shape there. And then, we have the field crop with a lot of that going into our own product. So we don't have to worry too much about selling wholesale, bulk oil. And so, that situation is pretty much taken care of. And then the other thing that I was, to be honest with you, really worried about was our liner sales, because we have greenhouses in about 4 different locations in the U.S. that, we're the breeder for. And so they'll actually grow our the mothers and the liners, and we're the sales unit behind it. And I was really worried. Well, a lot of these farmers we've been talking to that has anywhere from 5 acres to 100 acres, how are they going to take this news, and how are they going to change what they're going to do because of that unknown? And thus far, a lot of those orders have gone through. And to be honest with you, more than COVID, the big problem, especially in the South, has been the chaos caused from the federal government's regulations they put out. And so, like South Carolina, for example, we still don't know which rules we're going to be growing under. And so is that Delta 9? Is that total THC? And so the varieties that you would choose for one of those versus the other is significantly different, equating to maybe 3 times profit. And so, wow, if you don't know which one to buy yet, you're not going to buy it yet. And then the other thing is, so Georgia, for example, they just released applications to apply to get a permit. It'll be their first time. And, plants have to grow. They need time to grow. And most years by about February, the best liners will be sold out. And so everybody's just been having to wait because they don't have permits. And so now I wonder for those Georgia farmers, depending on how bad this gets, is the ag department going to be considered non-essential? And so a lot of those workers go home, where then their permits aren't even looked at. Because
that cannot happen.
I would hope not, but it's just something that we think about and worry about, because Georgia's our neighbor, and that's one of our, that's what we expected to be some of a big chunk of our business.
Wow. I mean, I guess if they didn't, they could always shut down certain divisions even of the ag department, so they could decide that certain food crops are essential, but ornamentals are not, or hemp is not, or some combination.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So that's scary. I mean, right now they're still working. But depending on how things go, they may or may not be.
Well, you've put out a lot of great informative posts on Instagram about what's going on with the regulations, and I hope a lot of people are appreciative of that. I certainly would not know what was going on so much with the hemp industry if it wasn't for your post. So thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I try. It's so interesting, and I don't get into politics at all, and I guess this is just something that's grabbed me by the heartstrings, and so I try to stay on top of it and share as much as I can.
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, you've been on, I mean, you've touched so many parts of sort of horticulture at large. And, before the hemp mine, you were cultivating cannabis in San Diego. Do you think that cannabis is, I don't know, uniquely positioned to weather this storm better than, say, hemp, for instance, or even other consumables in general? Like, I just think about, like what we talked about at the beginning with interstate commerce and potentially quarantining states, and all of a sudden everyone has to sort of fend for themselves at a state or local level. And the cannabis industry has had to navigate those rules and those restrictions from day one. I mean, are there things that, lessons learned that from the cannabis industry that could be translated to other industries that might be faced with these kinds of restrictions? I mean, it's so interesting to think, like, one of the biggest challenges that cannabis has had is not having interstate commerce, but now under the guise of COVID, it's almost all of a sudden like, been there, done that. Like, we got this.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think the cannabis industry, marijuana, that is, I mean, it's going to fare pretty well. I would think so. I was talking to one of my buddies, Josh Garavak, the other day, and he's up in LA now, and he said, for them, of course, as cultivators, it's business as usual. And as far as their distribution, it was still good. But he was saying, a lot of people are stuck at home bored. And so,
Right.
What else? What else do you want to do? It's a good way to pass the time, I suppose. And
yeah,
so,
you don't want to gain the COVID-19. You can't keep drinking. You got to switch to something else.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure there might potentially even be a lot of new users because, they're trying to make time enjoyable in a house. So who knows?
With their kids, whoever.
After bedtime.
Of course.
But, thinking about that, and goodness, I really hope as a hemp farmer, they do not make that call. And I say that because, South Carolina itself has deemed smokable flower and pretty much anything not extracted to be illegal. And so, one of our bigger parts of the business is selling pre-rolls and smokable flower and indoor grown and that sort of thing as a hemp product. And to do so, it's legal to do so and then ship out of state, but we can't supply other South Carolinians with it, which is really messed up.
That is so nuts.
So, if that were to happen, we would be in a lot of trouble, to be honest with you. Like I said, people, it might seem weird to a lot of the cannabis listeners out there, but a lot of people like smoking CBD hemp. And so, that for us would be a little bit different. As on the concentrate side, I mean, the majority of our business is in state and in the South. So that one wouldn't hurt quite as bad. But, I think a lot of people's businesses are going to depend on that in-state regulation and what their business model is based around.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it'll be interesting. With cannabis, they're kind of suited to have not to be vertically integrated each, but to have a surplus of services to where you can stay in state. Whereas in hemp, most people go out of state to do their extraction. A lot of people will even, bring in stuff from Colorado where there's a excess of hemp, to South Carolina and then bottle it up. So, it's really going to mess with the hemp industry, not to mention every other industry. But just thinking that, according to what I do right now, it could be devastating.
Do extraction products have the same sort of long shelf life we associate with dried flower? I mean, I feel like that's one of the potential advantages also of the cannabis industry relative to, fresh produce, let's just say, or ornamental cut, fresh cut flowers, for that matter, is that, you dry your product, or extract oil from that product, and it can sit on the shelf for a little while and not be sold. But I actually don't know the answer to that. I mean, do oils last for a little
Yeah,
while?
no, you're definitely right. So just for example, we kept some of our biomass for about a year, and I expected there to be some degradation or, something pretty negative about leaving it that long. And it was in the shade, but it was not temperature regulated. And you know how hot it gets in the South. So I had no idea what to expect. But, when we tested it compared to when we first harvested, it was only about 5% off, or actually less, about 3% difference. And so as far as extracting, it was good to go. Not that I would recommend leaving biomass in the heat like that, but you obviously wouldn't want to smoke it because it was super brown and not nice. But with that said, especially if you were in climate controlled, it lasts a long time. And then if you extract it and put it in the freezer, I mean, it'll just about last forever. So yeah, that's definitely a big benefit compared to, picking a tomato and, being on that timeline where you've got to make a quick sale. We definitely have the opportunity if things completely pause for 3 months, we wouldn't lose everything. We would just have to come back when it's over. So that's definitely a benefit.
Interesting. So when you extracted that biomass that had been sitting around for a while,
Mm-hmm.
do you? So you said you only lost like 3%, but was the extraction somehow faster? Like I feel like with more stuff broken down or with it dehydrated more potentially. I mean, did it kind of leave behind more of the oils and less of the what you would consider waste after an extraction process?
Yes and no. And so for us, a lot of the terpenes were gone because it got so hot. So that wasn't a great
Okay.
thing. But, interesting enough, a lot of the CBD users aren't quite as impressed by good terpenes as a cannabis user would be. And so today in time, that's not that big a deal. But, we do CO2 extraction. And so interestingly enough, when you decarboxylate flour, it has better extraction efficiency. And so because it sat so long in the heat, it did decarboxylate. And so, when you're looking at the nitty gritty numbers of extraction efficiency, that was better. I mean, that wasn't planned per se, but it was better.
I love serendipity. I love learning new things from chance.
For sure.
So when's your next trip? No.
Well, I'm going downstairs in a little while. I'm going to have some supper.
So do you have any predictions for what all is going to transpire out of this? I mean, for any of the industries that you've been involved with, or just, I mean, socially in general, Do you think we're going to be for the better, for the worse? Do you have high hopes, or I don't know?
It's funny. I've got so timid by making predictions, being in the hemp industry and all the regulations that keep get ripped from under me. And
this is a safe space.
Yeah.
Predict about something else. Predict about Easter lilies or something.
Easter lilies. Yeah, the irises are about to come up. No, but I don't know. I think there's going to be negatives and positives. I think a lot of people are going to be germaphobes after this for good reason. And I can't decide if that's going to be a good thing or a bad thing yet. A lot of people do need to be more clean. Sure. I don't think probably most people don't know how to wash their hands correctly prior to this. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, there's a lot of people that were already super germaphobes, and what's it going to do to that population? And then on the other hand, it's I think a lot of things will go to digital now. I think apps are going to explode. Actual dollars people aren't going to want to touch just because they're touched so much, which makes sense. But I think in general, hopefully it'll leave an imprint of how we can get by without being so wasteful. I mean, just talking about the tiniest things of, I would used to let a lot of my leftovers go to waste. And now I make sure to eat them all because I don't want to have to go to the grocery store quite as much. And, like you, not necessarily even needing to travel as much, or, a lot of people are working from home. And so, what's that going to equate to for, more people actually working from home, because it works if they train their mind to be efficient in that sort of way. So I don't know, it could be a pretty good thing for the earth.
I totally agree. A couple of points there. One is I've been really fascinated the last week or so getting on phone calls and video chats with other people where people are sharing their video of themselves, and they're not made up. You can tell they're wearing just, they're wearing a sweatshirt. They're probably wearing yoga pants, if pants at all. Mm-hmm. And, the women have their hair up in ponytails or buns. They probably went for a walk around the block. You see fur babies and real babies in the background. Yep. And it's so comfortable. Like, I just feel like because everyone is doing it, that it's okay to do it.
Yeah.
Where, I mean, we saw those old videos where, there was a guy or a lady who, is dressed up from the waist up in this video conference call. And then they get up and you can see that they're like wearing their boxer shorts or whatever. And it's like, that doesn't even matter anymore. And I kind of like it. I mean, people have been complaining recently that, the workplace has gotten too casual or whatever, but who cares? Like, if that's what you're most comfortable working in, and if we don't have to put up pretenses, then I think that there's just fewer barriers between us. If we just are ourselves. The other thing too is the job that I had before Dr. Greenhouse, the main headquarters was in San Francisco, and maybe once a month I would have to drive into the city from Sacramento. And it's like a 50-mile distance from Sacramento, from our house to San Francisco. And if I left at the wrong time of day, it would take 3 hours to get to San Francisco.
Jeez.
And I would park my car and I would sit there and I would take like a 30-minute power nap, because there's no way I could go in the state of mind that I was. I was I was stressed out, and the last thing I wanted to do was be around more people, you know? And it's just like, even if they were real people and not like car people. And and people did this every single day, where they drove in for 2 or 3 hours and then drove home for 2 or 3 hours every single day. And the brain drain that created just in myself, like the 50 people in that office, that's a brain drain of 50 people, you know, if all of them are doing that. And there was one guy who literally calculated how many days he spends in his car, and it was like 20 years.
Oh my gosh, that's terrible.
And it's just like, if we can do this work from home, if we can give people the tools and the support to do it from home, like, how much more productive will we be? Even if we only worked 6 hours a day instead of 10 hours a day after all that driving, they're going to produce such better output. I have to believe. It's, so we'll see. I've had people ask me to turn my workshops into online classes and training. So, people could learn remotely. And I've pushed back a lot because, I rely a lot on group activities and in-person exercises. And it's really hard as a teacher to gauge the progress of people learning if they're not right in front of you. And now, seeing everybody switch to online teaching, it's like, okay, well, maybe I don't have an excuse anymore. And maybe I can find the time to create some online teaching resources so people don't always have to come in person to these workshops, or it's maybe
and the computer guys right now are just eating this up and making really cool apps where it's easy to use, and you can have just do really creative things like that, even though it's virtual. So I'm sure that's coming.
Well, I hope so, and I hope that they make my life easy doing it. Awesome. Well, it's so nice to catch up with you. We haven't talked for a little while.
I know, it's been too long.
I still need to make it out to South Carolina, and I don't know, drive a tractor in an okra field.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And eat lots of okra too.
Of course. All the ways you can eat okra, from morning till night, for sure. And hopefully I'll see you, I guess maybe not at a conference anytime soon, but
yeah,
let's do this again.
Let's do it again. Yeah, let's chat soon.
Yeah, take care of yourself.
Hey, you too.
All right. Thanks, Allison.
Bye-bye.
Bye. That concludes my conversation with Dr. Allison Justice, who lives in South Carolina, a state that at the time of this conversation, and still today when this podcast is posted, has not issued quarantine orders for its residents. I was heartened to learn that farm supply stores are operating business as usual, and that the essential supplies needed to grow our agricultural products are not limited, at least not yet. I found it interesting that Allison and her family made the decision to diversify their crop mix this season to include food crops as well as hemp. During these uncertain times, I guess it makes sense that tomatoes and okra would have a more solid outlook for demand than hemp, for which the federal and state laws continue to evolve. Thank you, Allison, for your insights of farm life in the South.